It's good to be with you. Been gone for, I don't remember how long, come to think of it. Week or two. In Germany and in Norway. It's fun being there, by the way. Getting to see that people need real love pretty much everywhere. And working on some publishing rights in Europe. And so a fun experience, but very nice to be home. The first question or first viewer says, I've read what you've written on PMS, which must seem a little strange that I would comment on something I've never experienced, but then you continue, I know that when I get PMS, I get insane, and it seems that all of my getting and protecting behaviors come up. I let my husband know that it's that time and give him warnings before it happens, like he needs that. That's pretty good. My question is, when I ask for what I want from my spouse and he's empty, in my crazy state, I can't seem to let go of the expectations. How do I do that? It's easier when I'm not PMSing, but seems next to impossible when I'm a crazy lunatic woman. So it's really useful that you really get that it's a kind of insanity. It's not like women who are experiencing the emotional part of PMS, and women are highly variable about this. Most women really never experience much difficulty with PMS, but there's a significant portion that it's uncomfortable and mildly disturbing, and then there's a smaller group that it bothers a lot, and then an even smaller group that just go nuts. Highly variable, and you may find yourself moving from one group to the other depending on which month, what year, time of your life, and so on. So if you get that it's not that you're somehow morally defective, you're just physically crazy. I mean, if I gave you or any man for that matter, a high fever, once the temperature gets to a certain place in your brain, you just go crazy. There are men who get unusual fluctuations of hormones who become rather disturbed too. So, it's like not your fault, and that helps to at least get that. But you need to drum it into your head. Look, I'm about to go crazy. And then say, not to your husband, not just, it's going to be difficult for the next 2 days or 2 years. I'm sure it seems like that sometimes. But pretty much ignore my demands. And then you have to say that to yourself. I'm going to be nutty, and I can make my requests, but, I'm going to be difficult to get along with. And it's usually difficult for most partners to respond to demands. So I know what a paradox, but right at the time when you need to be loved most, it's common that that's when he feels least able to, because you tend to express it in irritable language. So, prepare him for it, but, even though you're telling him it's coming up, you need to remind yourself even better that for the next 2 or 3 days, I need to stay away from people. And if you have to say that, all the better. Then your expectations of yourself go down. You don't expect to behave sanely. You don't expect other people to behave sanely toward you. It's going to take practice for you to learn to deal with this. Not just tell him a couple times. And then, my advice to men who live with women who have this is you give everything you've got. So when they get crazy and they bite your head off, you'll grow a new one. Just relax and don't take it personally. And then if you don't, you'll find that you can give her a lot more than you did before. She doesn't need meticulous explanations. You don't meticulously explain anything to a crazy person. Just sit with her. Just hold her hand. Just say, it's going to be okay. Fewer words, the better. Whatever you can offer in terms of loving acts and so on, great. But mostly your calm, reassuring presence is probably the most important thing. The biggest mistake people make is taking the craziness personally, both the person who's nuts and the person who's not. This viewer says, I just got back into real love recently. I'm also going through a kind of breakup. Makes me wonder what kind of breakup. My ex of many years moved near me, and we started spending time together and then started dating. But we also fell into our same old patterns. Recently she said she needed more space, and I'm feeling rejected as a result. She seems comfortable spending some time together still, but because I'm feeling hurt, I don't want to see her, at least for a while. Part of me wants to be away from her so that I can sort out my thoughts and better take care of myself, but another part wants to push her away to hurt her in the same way that I feel hurt. How can I say that I need my space and be loving when I don't entirely feel that way? Well, you don't have to pretend to be loving. In fact, you don't even have to be loving. Just keep it simple. The simplest element, the simplest beginning step to all this, just tell the truth. So notice, the truths about her and about you. So, she's telling you that, when she says she needs space, she's not in a place to feel loved by you or in a place to be loving enough. And you are already partners and broke up, and now you're trying it again, and it's still not working. So another truth here to look at dispassionately, don't get all excited about it, but be realistic. See it is, as you said, you're back into old patterns. You're feeling rejected. She's withdrawing. It's the same old stuff. So rather than just blindly keep trying this over and over, we break up, we get back together, we repeat the same patterns. My gosh, I've seen people do that for decades. Rather than do that, ask yourself an important question. Are you ready for this relationship? Are you loving enough? Well, it seems like the answer is kind of obvious. No. And probably not ready for any exclusive relationship. It sounds like you're trying to do this without the tools that you need. So just agree with her. When she says, I need space, you say, well, then it's yours. I need some time to learn what it takes to be a more loving person too. And one of the big mistakes people make when they take space or take time is that what they do is then they keep making contact with each other. So then they keep emailing and they keep texting and they keep calling. And, well, doing it less, having less interaction isn't going to make you better prepared. It's the preparation that's the issue. So make it a real break. Say for 30 days, we'll have no contact at all, zero. And then you make a commitment to spend more time in person, on the phone, on conference calls, internet, whatever, with people who are capable of loving you. Then, at the end of 30 days or whatever you decide, then you go back and you see, so does this make a difference? But don't just go back together and see if you can get along. Go back together and really talk about the issues that have caused you problems in the past. So really go back and try it. And if you're not ready, take another 30 days or 60 days or whatever. Or realize, this may not be the person to do this with at all. But listen to her. And you don't have to be loving. Just be truthful. That's all you've got. Here's a viewer who says, I have a friend who has a real hard time getting along with his father. Has for all of his life. Their relationship hasn't been good. And recently, his father got sick. So I asked him if he'd learned anything from his interaction with his father while his father was, really sick and near death. And my friend said this. The number one thing he learned. It is possible to hate someone and love them at the same time. I love these little epigrams. If they sound really pithy, then you're supposed to think they're true. So then you continue. What do you think about that? It's a lie. It sounds cute, but it's just a way that we justify our lack of love and our anger. What the guy is saying is that there are lots of things about his father that he hates, and really probably has no clue how to unconditionally love his father, in great part because his father never unconditionally loved him. But he knows that doesn't look very good. And then, there were times that when he was with his father during his illness, he realized that he would miss his father, which he then calls love. Well, after I finish a drink, I miss it, but I don't love it. And there are lots of things that we call love. Missing a thing, being comfortable with a thing, getting something from a thing. So, if he's had a difficult relationship with his dad all his life, he didn't suddenly learn to become unconditionally loving because his father got sick. And the fact that he says, I hate him and love him. No, you just don't know how to love him. Now, it is true that while we're building up our reservoir of unconditional love, we may have only like 4 units. We're making this up. 4 units of love, and people may come along who need 8 and just empty us out immediately. Well, okay, then it is possible to be unconditionally loving somebody and then discover that you're overwhelmed by circumstances and that you're no longer able to love them. But to hate them and love them at the same time, no, not really. But we certainly do love to justify our hate, don't we? Here's a viewer who says, I have a girlfriend. See, this has got to be 3 in a row from men. That's unusual. I have a friend who has, here we are, a girlfriend who's very open with her affection. And when she's around other guys, it just makes me nuts. I can't stand it when she hugs them and lets them pick her up, and she's really affectionate in the words that she shares with him. And I tell her that I don't want her to do that. I don't want her to be sharing her affection that she should be sharing exclusively with me with other men. And she responds by saying that she doesn't want me to control her. But isn't she affecting me just as much by doing something that I hate as I am by insisting that she stop this? So, who's right? Well, you can make all the requests that you want. You can describe how you feel about what she does. You can say, I'm just not feeling secure enough, about feeling loved overall, and not feeling secure enough about feeling loved by you, that I can just watch when somebody's hugging you. It bothers me because I'm weak and empty and selfish and foolish. You can say that. You can describe how you feel. But you don't get to control her. You don't get to tell her, don't do that. Stop it. In fact, you do get to make a request. You could say, I would prefer, it's reasonable, for example, to say I would prefer that you don't spend time with past sexual partners. Reasonable to make a request like that. But it's not reasonable to make your request and then make it again. And then if she happens to talk to some old boyfriend from 10 years ago, to say, now I told you that I told you that it bothers me. I told you that I prefer that. When you make a request once or twice, it can be a request. It can be information. But when you make a request, 30 times, it's not a request anymore. Now you're beating your partner and making a demand and attempting to intimidate her to do what you want. So I've seen many people beat up on their partners by just, telling them how they feel. Well, telling somebody how you feel is just information, and it's not after you pound them with it over and over. And you'll discover that if you just let her go, you say, look, here's how I feel about it. It bothers me because it's my fault, I'm weak and selfish. And then you don't control her. Most of the time, when people feel trusted and loved, they will try to do what their partner wants. Over and over I see this. If you demand from somebody something, they will very often withdraw and not give it to you just because you demanded it. If you lighten up and let go, and this works with partners, it works with children, and relax and not get all excited. People tend to be willing to do a whole lot for the people that love them. Now, you were saying that she's affecting you by continuing to, talk to these guys, hug them, whatever she does. Well, yeah, it does affect you, but she's not doing it with them so that it will affect you. So her initial behavior is just being open and loving and affectionate, and on occasion maybe with somebody you would prefer that she not, but she's not doing it to you. Even though you've said, well, it bothers me. Well, okay, but that's a function of how loved you feel. So it's not doing it to you. Whereas when you try to control her, that is doing it to her. So in this particular case, I would say to her, be as loving as you can, be sensitive to your partner. Don't, overtly flaunt your affection toward other men in a way that would bother him, but, offer him what you can unconditionally. But to you, this controlling thing's just going to kill you. So both of you need to learn from this. Both of you need to be more loving. But of the two of you, usually, I'm just telling you from vast experience talking to people, the controlling person has to quit at first, because it's the more aggressive move, and it's the behavior that is directed at somebody. So just telling you, that's the thing that's going to be most practical, is for you to let go of the controlling and then see what happens after that. Here's a viewer who says, I've been divorced for 10 years. I have 2 teenage sons, but I'm presently unattached. I really want to have a healthy and loving relationship, so what should I be looking for in a partner? Well, the first thing that I would suggest is that you not look for a partner, that not even be on your horizon, that you first have considerable experience of getting unconditionally loved from, I can't tell here. Yeah, I can't tell if it's a man or a woman. So if it's a guy, I would suggest that you get as much unconditional love as you can from other men, from women for whom you could not possibly feel a sexual attraction. In other words, like women on conference calls that are there as wise women just to love whoever's on the call, people you'll never meet. Practice getting unconditionally loved in that way, in a generic way, before you even attempt to step into a relationship that would become exclusive. If you don't do that, imitation love will fool you every time. You'll think, well, I've learned some things, and I'll just pick a different kind of partner. No, you won't. Until you know what real love is, you'll fall for the same kind of imitation love again and again. So the first thing would be get it somewhere else. Then, when you finally think that you're ready for a partnership, then ask the people in your group, ask the people on your conference call, ask some people who really know you, who also know real love, not just some friend. Because if it's some friend you've known for years, well, the chances are very high that they're complicit in your search for imitation love anyway, and they'll support you. Talk to real love people and say, do you think I'm ready for a relationship now? And, if 5 out of 10 laugh out loud, you're probably not. But get other people's opinions, and only when you feel confident in knowing what real love is, and when you're not desperate for a partner, maybe then it's time to look for one. And then I would suggest reading the dating book first. Next viewer says, I'm spending some time with my 2 brothers and their wives. And I notice that often I'm quiet and I don't feel like contributing in the conversations. This morning, there was a discussion about how the government is introducing more legislation to curb people's behavior. My brother was saying how he doesn't understand why the government puts more and more speed cameras in, thinking this will slow people down. So he tends to be loud and vociferous about certain things. Ironic that he was talking about this particular behavior when he drives like a maniac. So I noticed that it's a lot easier to talk about what's for them, that it's easier to talk about what's going on out there than it is to talk about themselves. And I find myself doing the same thing. But what I'd rather do is talk about real love and truth-telling. And I notice how much of the conversations I participate in now are about attacking people or talking about how stupid the government is or the weather or car designs or whatever. And so what you're saying is, I'm just going to kind of summarize it because it's kind of long, that people just talk about nothing. In your words, it's about gym babes that are, here are guys with their iPhones and they have pictures of gym babes with big boobs running on running machines and everybody's laughing. Yeah, I know, men can be very deep. And you would like the conversations to be more meaningful than that. And then what you're saying is, I'm not sure how to contribute to the conversation in a way that feels true to myself, but doesn't sound like I'm being all sanctimonious or putting somebody else down. It's very common as people are first learning about real love and as they're appreciating how powerfully real love can affect them, they're wondering, well, how can the whole world not want to do this? I experienced the same thing myself, which is why I started writing books. It's like, how can everybody be satisfied with talking about beer and boobs when they could be talking about love and happiness and peace and wow, the kind of stuff that just really makes people happy? Well, easy. If you've been enjoying the temporary thrill of imitation love your entire life, and then somebody comes along and says, oh, no, there's something called unconditional love that's much better. And this guy's looking at a picture of this girl running on a track with her boobs, and he's going, no, I'll take the boobs. It actually makes sense. So it's up to us, people who are familiar with real love, to at least give people an opportunity to hear about what real love is. And the biggest way that we do that is by the way that we live. So first, I would suggest that you spend all the time that you can with loving people, to fill yourself up as much as possible, and then be more loving yourself. People will notice that you're loving and be attracted to you. And when other people are angry, you're not. When they're sad or alone or they're empty, and you offer genuine companionship and compassion, those are the ways that you will introduce people to real love. Now, you can also do it with words. Sometimes people will say, critical things like you were saying about your brother. Well, the government is stupid, and those people are stupid, and it's very simple, without being condescending or sanctimonious, to say, yeah, I've noticed that a lot of people behave like that. And in my experience, it's because they're just missing something important in their lives. And so they're responding out of their emptiness. Notice, I didn't say the word love or real love or getting and protecting behaviors. Nothing. This is just ordinary language. People behave badly because something's missing, because they're empty, because they're hurt. And if somebody then says, well, missing what? Well, see, they've already told you they're interested in a conversation like that. Otherwise, they'll go back to drinking beer and watching the babes. But if they say, well, missing what? Oh, now you say, well, my experience is that what people want more than anything is to feel cared for, to feel unconditionally cared for, unconditionally loved, if you like. And it's so important that when we don't have it, then we reach out and try to fill our emptiness with beer, boobs, anger, whatever it is. And notice, I'm not preachy, I'm not condescending, not criticizing anybody. I'm just answering their question. But it's never productive in the middle of a conversation about beer and boobs to say, well, those are ridiculous subjects to talk about. Why don't we talk about real love? That's not going to go over well. But do it in the ways that I was suggesting. You'll discover that there are many opportunities presented to us to talk about these subjects that, if we're aware of them, looking for them, we'll find them. We'll have lots of chances. And, the people who don't want to listen won't. but we will reach people, and it's a hoot to do it. Here's a woman who says, my 28-year-old son has Down syndrome. For those of you who don't know what Down syndrome is, when we're put together in the womb, each of us has 46 chromosomes, and we get 23 from one parent and 23 from the other. And in this particular syndrome, there's a duplication on one of the chromosomes, chromosome 21. And so these people either have an entire extra chromosome or at least part of one, and it causes some medical and other problems. But most notably, people with Down syndrome are developmentally delayed. It impairs their ability to think. They're usually mild to moderately delayed in their development and ability to function. So you continue. He's very independent. He buses all over town on his own, has a part-time job, and lives semi-independently. So he's doing better than a whole lot of people that I know who do not have Down syndrome. With help from a society he's connected to, he rents a house with 2 other roommates, and they have a staff, usually from 4 to 10 at night, noon to 10 on weekends, and he pays for this with a portion of his disability money. Before he goes to work each day, which starts at 11, he's supposed to meet another client from the house and a staff person downtown at a coffee shop at 9 o'clock for their out of the community day program. And then they go to the library and do some other stuff. But my son is often late arriving at the 9 o'clock meeting. And the staff person was annoyed and inconvenienced by this, so he called me and asked for my input. About a year ago, I came up with the token system. If I'd heard about Real Love at the time, I would not have, but I gave him a token each day that he was on time, and then when he got 5, he'd get a gift card so he could buy a DVD or something like that. And the token system seemed to work well for a while, but I started to notice that it only seems to work if he has a movie that he wants to buy. If he doesn't, then he doesn't care whether he's on time. And I find this sad because I don't like treating him like a trained SEAL, training him with rewards. And he doesn't seem to be getting the idea that being on time is important, that he doesn't make other people wait. So my concern is that if the group just leaves from the downtown meeting at 9, that my son will either go home and sit around all day on the days that he doesn't work, or on the days that he works, that he'll hang out downtown by himself until it's time for him to work. Now, it's not the most unsafe area, but there are some street people that hang out in the parks in that neighborhood. So if he was just to get himself to work at 11, I think he would succeed, but I'm not sure that having such a late start to his day is a good long-term plan. And actually, you go on some more about that, but my biggest question to you would be, why are you managing him? Like you said, he's pretty independent. He has a job. He has money. Using his disability, he pays for the house that he lives in. You're not getting complaints from his job that he's on time, that he's late. You're getting a complaint from some staff worker who says that he's late to an optional activity before work. Well, if forget that he has Down syndrome. Anybody who's consistently late to a thing is telling you what? I don't really especially enjoy the activity. So I would actually listen to him. I would say, so you're being late. You're not late to things you like. I'll bet he's not late to, dinner when it's something that he likes and there's ice cream. He's not late to the bus to get to something that matters. I'd ask him, do you really like going to that meeting? Do you really want to keep going to it? If he says no, then say, well, then go when you want. But if you don't want to go, then, let him know the days you're not going to go. And this just because this staff person came to you and said, I need help. Well, it sounds like if he's the staff person, it's his job to get your son there on time, not yours. You're trying to manage somebody who really already has their own life. Now, you could maintain that he's not entirely an adult because he's developmentally challenged, but gosh, he sure shows a lot of sign. He's a lot more mature than a lot of other guys I know of who have normal intelligence and don't have jobs. Leave him alone. It's not worth bothering him. But you might suggest to the group leader, let them establish their own consequences if he's late. So, for example, if he's late and he's not there by 9, they just leave. Or they don't include him in the next activity that the group goes to, so that they motivate him to show up on time. But for you to motivate him to show up on time to something you're not even there at, as you're discovering, it doesn't work very well. And certainly not going to work for very long. So I'd leave him alone. Let him figure it out. Here's a viewer who says, I'm a teacher. And on more than one occasion, another teacher doesn't do something that he should have done. And this has caused a headache for me. And I'm his supervisor. So when this guy fails to do his job with a student, then I get an unhappy parent on the phone. So 2 of you are teachers, you're the supervisor, this guy doesn't do his job, and then they complain to you, which I get. Then I'm irritated, and this guy's getting worse. I'm conscientious, this guy's not. He's lazy, he drinks a lot, I don't do any of those things. Now, maybe it's none of my business how he chooses to behave, but he creates work for me. And I hate it that I have to pay for his sloppiness. I try to be diplomatic, but sometimes I want to explode. I hate it that lazy people seem to get away with their behavior. So why don't I just be lazy like him? Anyway, I don't want to be irritated, so I guess I need to get more dollars in my bank so I won't be annoyed when he pinches $2 off me, yes? You're anticipating my answer already. But what if what he's doing is impinging on other people? Is it still none of my business? So I would say that, if you were not his supervisor, then this would be none of your business. You just recognize that, there's injustice everywhere and you can't control it all. But see, if you were not his supervisor, then when he screwed up, you wouldn't be having parents call you. So it turns out you do have something to say about this. You are his supervisor. When he screws up, his mistakes do come to you. And so you do what any teacher or parent does. You love and you teach. But being irritated never helps. In fact, he's not going to be able to hear you if you get irritated. But you have to say something to him every time. Whereas what you're doing is, some of the times that he inconveniences you, well, you just kind of swallow it and live with it. My guess is that if he's lazy and irresponsible, he probably doesn't like to have that pointed out and probably makes it unpleasant for you when you try to. So very likely you're afraid of incurring his displeasure, his anger, when you talk to him about this. So either you point it out to him inconsistently or you don't point it out to him at all because you're afraid of either what he's done or what he's going to do. Well, so that's your choice. Every time he does something like this, you have to point it out. That's what supervisors do. It's what the word means. So if this guy screws up, then you go to this guy and you say, here's the job as it's been described, as it has been carefully outlined. It is my responsibility to point out to you that there is a difference between how the job's described and how you did it in this particular instance. So, can you tell me why that happened? Now notice, there's no attacking, but you're holding him accountable. Here's the ideal, here's your behavior, there's a difference. Why is that? Have him explain it. And if the reason isn't enough, because it never will be, he'll come up with excuses and just foolishness. The phase of the moon, well, I couldn't help being late, blah, blah. So if the reasons are ridiculous, then you just say, well, that's not a good enough reason. You have to consistently meet this particular standard of behavior. And if you point it out every time, he's either going to start doing it or he's going to explode. Either way, you win. And see, you're afraid of the explosion. If he explodes, now you simply document it and you say, so I'm going to be writing down here that you and I have had this evaluative interaction, and that you have chosen, instead of modifying your behavior, you've chosen to explode. If that happens consistently, I'm assuming either you can fire him, or you would take this report of consistent lack of performance and take it to whoever can fire him. But see, he's going to know that. So you explain to him that if this difference continues, he can behave any way he wants, but not there. And at some point, you may have to share this with the person who has the hire and fire capability, that, obviously. And then, but before you get to firing, you tell him, here's the difference between what is and what should be, why, and then what can I do to help? So way before you get to confrontations, you're loving him, you're accepting him, you're teaching him, you're offering to help him, but you've got to not do what it sounds like you've been doing, which is not hold him accountable. And you say you have teachers calling you. Well, if it's because of his lack of performance, then what you would do is you say, oh, that's a very good observation, you say to the parent. That would be a problem. Let me give you the phone number of the teacher who is in charge of that particular moment or that thing that they're complaining about. So they're at least complaining to the right person. Now you get to document that he didn't do his job. The parent called the teacher. It still didn't improve. The teacher was snippy or uncooperative with the parent and continues to be uncooperative with you, as opposed to you're just being irritated. Nope. Love, teach, document, and then occasionally you have to impose consequences, which for an employee is sometimes letting them go. But being irritated, it's not going to help anybody. Never has that I've seen. Here's a viewer who says, I have a new exclusive relationship. And he has been widowed for 5 years. Is widower a verb? He's been widowered? No. He's been widowed for 5 years. And he says, I know that you think this is a done deal, but I'm not there yet. He worries about control. He worries about expectations. I love him unconditionally. He's interpreting what I say in ways that I don't mean. I will tell him, and he says that he's glad I straightened him out on that, and he says that it's his issue, which is unusually honest. How can I make it so that he doesn't interpret what I say as control or with an expectation? Oh, well, I don't know how long you've been in this relationship, but I would say you continue to practice. I would actually suggest if you're in an exclusive relationship already, which is what you say here, and you want to work it out, then the book to read is Real Love and Marriage. And I would suggest that you read the Real Love and Marriage book, that you read the 40-day companion that goes along with the marriage book. If you two will go through that book cover to cover and do the 40-day manual that goes along with it, the two of you will learn, you'll either split up or you'll learn to communicate with each other. Because the book requires that you be truthful to each other. It says, all right, now read these pages in the marriage book. Now, tell your partner how you do blank. All the book really was intended to do was to help you practice these principles with each other. So that's what I would suggest you do. I mean, it sounds like he has moments where he's capable of being honest about something being his issue versus yours, which is a great start. And you're just going to give him more opportunities to practice listening to you, more opportunities for you to practice communicating to him your preferences, your desires, your feelings without controlling and expectations. And if you both do it at the same time, gee, the results can sometimes just be miraculous. Here's a viewer who says, when we ask a question of our 13-year-old, he is starting to get very irritated, saying, it's annoying. He's getting irritated. Irritated with the questions, I guess. What can we say to him when this happens? This is happening when, when it's a simple question, such as, like, who is singing this song? So I don't know if your 13-year-old's a boy or a girl, but I mean, this is an age when their hormones kind of go crazy and they go through a period of several years of PMS. And so it's harder to talk to them. But that doesn't give them an excuse or a justification for responding snottily to people when they ask questions. So you cannot get irritated when a 13-year-old is snippy. It's annoying. No, you cannot get irritated yourself, because now what the 13-year-old is doing, they're inviting you onto the field of death. They're already there. And if you get irritated, then you leap right onto the field of death with them. And the two of you are just going to beat each other bloody and senseless, and nobody wins. So always listen. So when a 13-year-old says, well, that's annoying, like when you ask, who's singing this song? I can just hear this kid. And so you say, so you stop everything. So tell me, what is annoying about that? Is it annoying that I know? First, just leave the question alone. Just what's annoying about that? And usually they won't have a good answer. They'll just say, well, it just is. They're not real articulate at 13. So you say, so is it annoying that I don't know something and you do? Is it because I've inconvenienced you for 3 seconds? I'll just sit with you while you figure it out. What was annoying about my question? Was it that I was hitting you when I asked the question? Was it that I was running over you with a car while I asked the question? Now, notice there's a gentle mocking to this, because you're communicating to the kid in a gentle, loving way without being mean. You're communicating to the kid that they're being irritated at your asking a question is pretty insane. But because you're not being impatient and you're not being unkind or angry, it gives the kid a chance to see that it's nutty to be irritated about a question. So you keep asking questions and you eventually get to the conclusion that, was my question unreasonable? Was it unreasonable for me to ask you who's singing this song? No, it really wasn't. And you keep it up till they see that. So you are being impatient about what? And then you help them get to the conclusion. They were being impatient because they were selfish, because they were thinking only of themselves, and they don't like anybody to inconvenience them. And you say, so is that the kind of thing you want to keep up? Notice, no impatience, nothing. So it's very helpful to a child to be taught what they're doing so that they can just see how rude and selfish and insensitive and unkind it is. And, if in time you need to point out, for example, well, did I get impatient and yell at you when you asked me questions from, let's see, as soon as you could speak a word, actually as soon as you could scream, which would have been from birth till now, would you like it if I got impatient with you when you needed something? Well, of course you wouldn't. So I'm just kind of pointing out to you that when you get snippy and snotty like that, what people hear is that you don't care about them, that you're focused only on yourself. I'm not going to get angry, but for the rest of your life, the people around you will. So if you try this, well, it's just annoying trick with your girlfriend or boyfriend or spouse or your children, you're going to find that their reactions will probably be less tempered than my own. What you're doing is teaching them the principles of loving and relationships all the time, which most of us were never taught. We were never taught what is the meaning of our behavior right there. What did you mean when you were rude right then? What's the effect of your being rude? So you're teaching and loving this kid. And then it turns into a very cool lesson. You have to be very careful, though. If you go to teach this lesson and you're impatient, you will screw it up. If you say, so what do you mean by that? You're dead. It's because it's it's not that the attitude with which you do it is important. It's like everything. Very important to get before we criticize a child. Similar question from a viewer who says, 12-year-old who is deciding on his own bedtime, cool, and getting up on his own. He seems to stay up late and is tired in the morning. There are times that this will affect his health, like he'll get headaches. I've pointed this out a few times, which comes across as judgmental to him. Should I ignore it or try to find a better way to draw a connection between his sleep and his happiness? Oh, no, please. You do need to point it out. But again, you have to point it out with zero attitude. So you say to the child, for the last couple of nights, you stayed up really late. And that's up to you. It's up to you when you go to sleep. But then you get up in the morning and you're tired, grouchy, and you have a headache. So I'm not really debating whether they're linked. They are linked. If you don't get enough sleep, you get tired, you get a headache, you're not enjoying your life as much. So I'm just pointing out what you're doing and suggesting that you learn from it. Now, if you don't, you're welcome to be grouchy. But see, then what we're going to do is, if you keep it up, then we will impose other consequences for it. So you want to get up in the morning and have a headache, fine. But if you treat other people ill, then we may impose consequences for that. If you don't get your jobs done around the house, we may impose consequences for that. So you need to see the association that when you're not wise about your bedtime, that it affects your behavior in other ways, and then you get consequences for those secondary behaviors. So if you want to avoid those, then the smart thing is to go to bed earlier, because that's how it works in the real world. If you show up late for work, the boss doesn't say, you have to go to bed earlier. That'd be hysterical. And that's what you're explaining to the kid. You say, in real life, if I show up late, my boss doesn't say, well, now, I'll call you at 9 to see if you're in bed, and I'll help you get up in the morning. No, if you keep it up, the boss just fires you. And I'm going to do a similar thing with you. Now, unfortunately, I cannot fire you as a kid. I have lobbied the legislature that I can, but I can't. So we'll just make other kinds of consequences. If the kid keeps that up, for example, and he's tired and grouchy in the morning, you might say, we can't have grouchy people go, if you have a family activity where you're going to the movies, for example, the kid may miss that because grouchy people can't go out with the family while they're being snotty and rude to everybody. I'm just coming up with some possible ones that would kind of get your own brain going. Or grouchy and snotty people obviously, need more rest. And so you can't be watching television. You can't be playing with the computer. Maybe you need a nap in the middle of the day instead of, playing. Grouchy and snotty people can't go out with their friends. We certainly don't want the family represented by Mr. Hyde. I'm just going down a list of things that you can impose as consequences that a kid will hate. And so even though the kid has the right to set his own bedtime, you're making it clear in a non-judgmental, non-angry way that he still has to pay the price for the results of his stupid decision. See, it's just like telling a kid he can drive a car. Sure, kid can drive the car when he's 16, 17, whatever it is, and I'm not going to drive the car for him. I'm not going to be in there going, okay, left, right, slower. But if you get a ticket, then you're going to have to pay the ticket and the insurance and possibly lose your right to drive the car, you see? So what we tend to do is we give children the ability to choose, then we rescue them from the consequences of bad choices. No, just hold them accountable. Here's a viewer who says, my husband Fred and I are doing much better now after beginning the process of reading Real Love and Marriage and implementing what we've learned. Our relationship is so much more sweet and loving. Well, good for you. I mean, hallelujah. It'd be so cool if more people would do that. You continue. I'm struggling with my daughter Susie, and then that affects my relationship with my husband Fred. This morning, everybody's getting ready to leave. And Susie finishes a few minutes early, but forgets to feed the dogs, which is her job. I can see that she's forgetting. I go into the bedroom and tell Fred that I realize she's forgetting, and I ask him that he not rescue her. He comes out into the kitchen, and it's killing him not to tell her to feed the dogs, because he hates it when she gets consequences for not doing her jobs. So he's trying to save her. So then he starts making jokes to me. Under his breath, he's making barking noises. So he's ignoring me and trying to save the kid, and I keep telling him to stop. He's running late. Now it's time to go, and he says out loud, should I let the dogs in? Because the dogs didn't need to be let in. He's trying to give her hints so that she'll feed the dogs so she doesn't get in trouble, because he hates being the bad guy. So now it's after 7:45, which is the time that we leave. And now suddenly, when it's time to leave, she goes, I need to feed the dogs. And I tell her it's too late. Good for you, by the way, instead of rescuing her. She catches on to what was going on between me and my husband Fred. Now she's catching on to what the barking was about. And she sees me as the bad guy and Fred as her best friend. Not fair, huh? I have enough issues with her. I don't need any help looking bad in her eyes. So, first, Susie. And then we'll kill Fred in a minute. She needs more help remembering. Kids do what is easiest, and they do what they like. They don't, without considerable help, do the thing that's harder, the thing that requires more effort. So, they forget everything else. They do what's easy, what they like, and then the rest of it they just put out of their mind. They don't genuinely forget. They actually set it aside because they don't want to do it. So you need to give her a reason to remember. When people have enough reason to remember, if you tell a kid that they're going on a cruise with their friends in the Caribbean and the boat leaves at 8, kids are not late. Kids are, we've raised 7 kids. They're never late to something that matters to them. So the idea is to make it matter more. So what do? You set a time by which she needs to have fed the dog. You don't just say, get the dog fed in the morning. You say the dog has to be fed by this time. And if the dog isn't fed by that time, then even if you do it, it doesn't count as the dog fed. Your boss just doesn't say, come to work today. Otherwise, we'd show up at 4 and leave at 5. No, we have to show up at a certain time. Then give her suggestions about what she could do to remember. Like, you're not nagging. You're saying, these are things that will help you. So make the very first thing that you do when you get up in the morning, before you eat, before you do anything else, you say, you feed the dog. And then you might help her with a consequence. You might say, and we will make it so that we will help remind you that if you go to, for example, eat breakfast before you fed the dog, we'll go, there will be no breakfast for you. You come up with something creative on your own. But give them a reason to remember, because if they know that they can't eat till they've fed the dog, they tend to feed the dog. And these kind of associations are formed all throughout our lives. We remember to get dressed before we go to school because, it's embarrassing to go to school naked. And so kids don't forget. So do the same thing with feeding the dog and eating or some other things she likes to do. Or you could put a sign on her closet door that says feed the dog, so that she actually has to move it aside before she gets dressed in the morning. Or she goes to sleep with a rubber band on her wrist and has to, she can't take it off until she's fed the dog. There are just lots of little clever things you can do to help her remind a kid who consistently forgets about something. then you have to teach her all this calmly and logically, and demonstrate that you're not trying to get her to feed the dog. No, that's just her job. It's not to help you. Kids get very confused about this. The kids in our house didn't do their jobs to help me, because I could do the job in less time that it took to remind them. No, they're doing it for themselves. And you're helping her come up with ways to remember, because you're cooperating with her and doing something that is her job. That's quite a different attitude from nagging a kid, let me tell you. So then you explain, I think we talked about the time, and if you have to remind her to do it after the time, then she still has to feed the dog, but now it doesn't count. Then you describe the consequences for not feeding the dog by a specific time. So the moment that, let's say the dog has to be fed by 7:15, the moment you get to 7:15, you say the dog is not fed. And at that point, she has to feed the dog and get the consequence for not feeding the dog, even though she's doing it, because late doesn't count. And then you come up with consequences. And it's up to you what you do. I mean, if the dog doesn't eat, then you don't eat dinner that day, or you don't eat lunch, or the dog doesn't eat, then, obviously you were too busy, so you're not going to have time to watch television either. Children just hate it when you're logical with them. Or you remove some other thing that she particularly likes for a day. And don't make the consequences so horrible that, the child ends up hating life. Parents will sometimes, when a child makes a mistake, ground them for, a year. Kids don't get a year. That doesn't even make sense to them. It doesn't even make sense to ground a kid for a month. So, a kid screws up, then you remove what they like to do for a day. They get that. Now, you and Fred, you two need to talk about how to help her succeed in all this and then not undermine each other. So, for example, the moment that he started making the little barking noises, instead of you getting annoyed, you immediately say, "Can I see you in the next room?" And you go in the next room and go, "You can keep this up if you want to, but I think it's not contributing to helping her learn responsibility. So I'm just pointing out to you what I think about this situation." Most of the time, partners will get it without you saying things like, "Stop it," or "I hate it." What you do is point out how it's not contributing to the goal that you shared. And if you do that, wow, it just tends to eliminate most of the opportunities for disagreement. Then read the parenting book together and come up with how you're going to approach not just this, but many circumstances. The more you guys are cooperating, the less conflict there is, just in the same way that you're cooperating with your child to get a job done. And it's all just critically important. When a child grows up in a happy home, the child tends to grow up happy. So it's kind of a lifelong effort, and I admire what you're doing. I admire parents who have the guts to love, teach, be consistent, and occasionally apply consequences. But loving and teaching being the single most important thing. So it's wonderful that you're even asking about this, and obvious that you have a desire to help your child be happier. So great questions from everybody, as usual, and we'll look forward to seeing you in a week. And between now and then, just remember that as you want to be happy, it's always about real love. See you in a week.